right, welcome to Double Barrel Non-Duality for July of 2023. Our special guest today is a gentleman who I've interviewed before. He's been on my channel. He is a filmmaker. He also works with people who are going through this awakening process on a one-on-one basis, part-time. Just a lovely human being, very attuned to the nuances of the process in how it plays out in people's psyche, and one of the more sensitive to people to that that I've met, and I think that benefits his interactions with people quite a bit. But overall, just a great guy. His name is Matt Garrett. You want to say hi, Matt?
Yeah, hey brother, nice to see you again. So I was on mute there, but yeah, wonderful to join with you all today. It's great to see you, and it's great to finally reconnect after quite a long time. Yeah, lovely to see your face as well. I don't know whether it was going to just be a split screen, but this is far more intimate than I thought, so which is great. Yeah, thanks for having me, Angela. It's perfect.
My pleasure. Yeah, and thank you for being here. I'm going to keep it on speaker view just because that way the recording looks that way, but you can put it on anything you want. I like when I'm not recording to have it on gallery view because I just see everyone's faces, but obviously do that however you want to. So let's just, people already have their hands up. Let's start with Marcy.
Hi, Angelo.
Hey, Marcy. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you too. I just did your retreat. Whoa, it was great. So, yeah, I have a kind of a burning question from that. One thing that you said that really zinged into me was look from the looking. And that's such a direct, obvious pointing. And you can correct me, you're sensing into me, hopefully. And it seems to, right now I'm kind of nervous, but take me directly to that unconditioned space.
Yeah. It's like unconditioned seeing, unconditioned knowing, unconditioned experiencing. And I just I remember the talk you're referring to, and I try to say it different ways to walk people back into it, because I know that it's not about how I say it. It's about you directly experiencing it clearly enough for a moment that you just get it, and you're like, oh, and you get, you can get it at very deep levels. You can get it at just a shallow level at first, but it doesn't matter. Once you get it, you kind of know, I want to say, how to get there, lead yourself back to it, but you're already there. That's the point. So you know how to use a phrase or just a remembering to just stop the seeking mind enough so that you are looking from the looking. I agree. That's a really, I don't remember saying it actually, but that's a really good way of saying it. You want to look from the looking, and then you're just right there. It feels like a sort of delicate balance of attention, being attentive and alert and sort of open in the sensory experience. And at the same time, it's kind of a relinquishment of doing, right? It's so simple. Yeah. I mean, I can see it in your eyes. I feel like you're just right there with it.
Yeah. It's like stops.
Yep. That's it.
Yeah.
There's nothing more to do. That's it. When you click on that, when you can kind of get that intuitively, you kind of let it deepen itself often, as a practice. And then when you're not doing that, you can do other emotion work if it comes up or something.
Yeah. So here's the question with this. So when I first started doing, looking into waking up, I was with a Gurdjieff group, Gurdjieff Ouspensky group, and they're big on presence and stopping thought. So I was, that's all I knew. And I was like, okay, stop thought. I worked really hard, stopping thought and just trying to be present. And it worked. I mean, something opened up. But then I eventually realized that group was not the best. And so I left, and, time went on, and I found Adyashanti, when I found Adya, I mentioned that stopping thought, method to him, and he said, "Well, that's just another thought."
Mhm.
And then he also said many times that if you go to war with the mind, his teacher told him this, Arvis, you go to the war with the mind, you'll be at war forever. So then it comes back to one of your pointings. So for me, it's like this unconditioned space. One of the things that we can do is look for the next thought, wonder what it will be. And so this part of me that's kind of conditioned from this past, teachings, these past teachings is like, uh-oh, wait a second. If I say that's another thought, I'm getting back to that kind of stopping thought thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to clarify that with you.
I think you're beyond having to like remind yourself that you just experienced another thought, because when you're looking from the looking, it doesn't matter if thoughts stop or don't stop. It's like they're already incorporated. Do you feel that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're already intuitively beyond that initial. There are plenty of ways of pointing, and sometimes just having someone stop the mind can be helpful if it's in the right setting and so forth. But as Adyashanti said, it can become another thought very easily. Then it's it's just something you're holding on to. But when you can do what you're talking about, when you remember that backward step and how that's already taken, actually, whether it's through a simple phrase like look from the looking or whatever, once that's the case, then a lot of this stuff you're asking about, it's not a problem. It's just not, because it's already incorporated. Anything that stirs here, whether it's a thought or not a thought, or I don't know what it is, or I do know what it is, doesn't even matter. It's already there. It's already encompassed by this clear knowing, right?
Okay, so then it's just about staying or just letting myself steep kind of.
Yeah. Giving, it's really, you don't even have to force yourself to stay because you're not away from there. What it's about, if anything, is just giving it space in your life, meaning giving yourself time to sit with this.
Okay.
And just sit. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I'm glad you know how to find that space so easily now.
Yeah.
Once you do, it's so beautiful. It's a very nice way, because then it can incorporate anything, including a thought, even a very sticky thought, even a sort of vasana that's very heavy. Like that can be incorporated in that. It almost feels like you're sort of staring at a thought, but at the same time, there's this complete whole of consciousness that it doesn't differentiate the two at all. And you're holding all of it at once in this space. It's so nice. And then that's when those vasanas can kind of naturally and passively just dissolve again. That's a really good place to be. It takes a little while before you have that kind of clarity, but you sound like you're pretty much there. So it becomes a very nice way to sit. Yeah,
I was going to say that, and you used the term the backward step, and I was like, this is it.
That's it. That's it. Don't overcomplicate it.
No, it's so simple.
Good. I'm glad you followed back up with me after that conversation.
Okay. All right. Cool. Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah. Nice to see you again.
Okay.
Let's go to Amit.
Hey, Angelo.
Hey, good to see you again.
My question is about, I've got actually two questions. First question is about fetters. So when you're working with sixth and seventh fetter, and some of the fourth and fifth fetter come up, some of the emotions come up, it's okay, right? This can happen, that you're working with seventh fetter and some of the fourth and fifth gets released. And I think even Kevin says that some of the old trauma can also get released even till the eighth, ninth fetter.
Yeah, there's different levels of reactivity for sure. There's gross reactivity, which is kind of the way he describes fourth and fifth fetter breaking. That's you're breaking your like gross tendency to react to anything in an actual physical way. But it doesn't mean resistance is gone. Resistance isn't gone. Resistance can be very intense even later on. So yeah, I think the way you're saying is pretty typical.
Right. And the question about Mu, so I've started reading 3 Pillars of Zen, and it's just amazing. So when I inquire about Mu, it's just the whole inquiry takes me over. And it's just mind blowing. But at other times, especially when I'm busy in my daily life, that inquiry is not having a holding space. That's when I work with the fetters directly and I work with the visual field. And then the mind says like, okay, we're working with the visual field, but the book said that you have to really, really get all your bones and pores should be with Mu all the time. So I think the question is that, do I just work with one type of inquiry?
Well, I mean, if you're working through fetters at this point, you've had an initial shift of some kind. So that would be when you absorb yourself into Mu 24/7 and that kind of thing to approach that initial shift. Once that's happened, it's more like Shikan Mu. It's like, as my teacher used to call it, like you can be with Mu at any time because you already know what it is intuitively. As you said, it just takes everything over, but it doesn't have to be the whole of practice. There can be other approaches for sure. At a different time of the day, you may work in this visual field. So, for instance, that's my take on it.
Okay. Yeah, that clarifies it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Matt, you have anything else to add to that one?
Oh, Angelo, you're the master of the metaphysics and non-duality. So for this, it's perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
Anything I was going to say, actually, anything that comes up around trauma, comes up around the heart-based stuff as well. I'm glad to put in what's come up here. So anything around that for sure. But with the metaphysics, with the non-dual pointing, the non-duality, yeah, you're perfect for that. So
yeah, and these two conversations were started like a couple of days ago. Both the last two people, I had initial half the conversation, and this was kind of the follow-up. So I think, yeah. Okay, let's go to Jordan.
Hey, Angelo. Hey, Matt. I love both of your stuff. Matt, I just love your videos, so I'm so happy to see you here. Angelo, I just finished your retreat, and it was really great. Thank you so much for organizing that. And also at the end, you mentioned there must be a programmer here, so that's me. So I'd love to help you out with that stuff sometime.
Thank you. Send me an email.
Okay, cool, we'll do. So my question is, like, on the retreat, pretty much on the first night, I felt this kind of like big, I call it like the rock in my chest. I've felt it at previous retreats, and on this retreat I realized like it's always been there. It's been there for decades, but it's just been kind of sort of under the surface or hidden. And it just came out, like I realized it was there, and it sort of felt like very dense, and I wasn't sure how to work with it, but I sort of observed it, and it sort of started to shift a little bit, but it feels like I could spend like the next 5 retreats just focusing on this sensation in the chest. It feels like there's so much bundled up there. None of it really seems to be like coming out in an explosive way or anything, but it just sort of feels like I'm sitting there looking at it, observing it. And so I guess my intuition says to just stay with it, but there's this doubt in my mind that comes up that yourself and other teachers have said, you could spend the rest of your life trying to purify yourself, but you need to find out kind of what you are. And so I guess my question is, like, can you talk to that doubt? And is there something, like, should I still be doing kind of self-inquiry on top of that, or should I be doing self-inquiry while that's so prominent, that sensation there?
I have something coming up here if you want me just to start with this.
I figured that would go right to you, Matt.
Just because it's simply something that I've asked the exact same question, I think, to Angelo quite a few times a few years ago. And I think what we're dealing with here, if I'm not mistaken, is it's a frozen condensation of energy that really sometimes when it's so frozen, it doesn't even feel like emotion. It kind of just feels like a solid rock. It may feel as though there's just an energy blockage. Really, it's a buildup of energetic condensation. So what I started to realize anyway in my path was that we had to somehow break this open. We had to, we've seen it being spoken about in the killer bee inquiries, but really I like to call it the iceberg inquiries, because ultimately it feels as though there's an iceberg, and really sometimes it feels like you can't process stuff that's frozen because it feels so condensed down. And what started to become quite obvious, these were layers really of just separation. And we can have all the flavors of this is repressed anger, this is repressed fear, this is it can be made a lot more simple as well. I really like to call it a concealed vibration. It's really a concealment of all of these repressed layers of identification that have been packed down over time. And so when they're so packed down, to me, it took inquiry to break apart this and to not, basically to not just put your tent up halfway up the mountain. Or really, it's more of a descent down into surrender. It's, if I can give any encouragement, don't stop until any blockages have been, I mean, all blockages have been opened up, because the flow of energy, really what you're looking for a lot of the time that people get, they get quite stuck in sometimes self-inquiry without the somatic work. And sometimes they're looking really for the release of the blockages over just self-inquiry. So what I was doing anyway, I was kind of resisting going back into the somatic work, which I really call transmutation. So if we just call it transmutation, it's a conversion of these energies. So we have a lot of repressed fear, a lot of repressed whatever, but when these get converted, we start to see that the substance of this fear is the same as love. This, I'm on a retreat, by the way, so there's people coming in at random times. This is Shemai, he's a sage. He's getting his shoes. So what we see is this is transmutation. It's really a conversion of, it's really a conversion of these repressed fears. So when they do get converted, like you say, these blockages start to clear out. And a lot of the time, as a byproduct of these blockages opening up and the energy starting free again, the insights that we thought we'd find a lot of the time from self-inquiry are then seen. So, because these are so many layers of self as well, it started to open up insights into no self, into distance. Sometimes there were blockages to do with keeping the world as real and keeping the body as real as well. So yeah, if I could just give encouragement is, don't, firstly, the doubt is great in terms of just feeling it may not, you know, uproot and then process it. But ultimately we need to, like I said, the iceberg is to melt it. And then in that processing, suddenly they start coming up more and more. And we call this surfacing as well. So at the moment, it may feel like just a solid rock with not much surfacing, but what we're looking for is whatever's stopping this from surfacing and then processing these energies out, because the relief you get from the body being relieved of these blockages is immense. It's really what a lot of people are looking for in a lot of the heady identity stuff. So yeah, I don't know if Angelo wants to add anything to that as well.
No, I think that's really clear, and that's exactly what it is. Yeah, what you said. I mean, you sometimes you have to descend to continue the ascent, and if you get too singular with something like self-inquiry or direct insight practices, the gravity of that is so strong. It just keeps holding you. Yeah, like it's just saying, hey, look here, even if you don't know how to look here. I know that's frustrating, but as Matt said, you find a way in, give it the respect and attention it deserves. The thing I was going to ask you, just for follow-up, Matt, I love that you used the word, it's concealment, like layers of concealment. Can you talk about that? How does the concealment start? Who's the agent? Where's the agent? Is it something we adopt from other humans? Is it a misunderstanding and a response to our own internal experience? Or what do you think that concealment's about?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, because what sometimes people fall into the trap into is keeping the agent, keeping the self, and as a self, I'm going to do this transmutation in order for, let's say, a horizontal time in the future where I'll have, you know, I'll be a self still, but at least my transmutation will have gone through and I'll have like a healthy body. It's insanity. It doesn't really make sense if you actually logically think about it. So what we're really looking for is a intelligent approach to transmutation, which really has the context of self, because what you're letting up and out is the feelings of self, because this concealed vibration, yeah, we can say fear, anger, grief, you can give all the flavors, but the skill in this is the simplification of the process, which you don't even have to label these certain concealed vibrations, because that ultimately creates this story again. Sometimes it creates the self again that's experienced this. And at times it's good to get in touch with, let's say, anger that you haven't felt. So we can say that's anger and we can see it's repressed anger. Let's say there's grief that you've lost a child and you haven't felt that grief. Great, this is great. But ultimately, when you take away the story, which is just a rationalization of the sensation, you're left with just raw energy that has no thought structure to keep it in place. Without the story, there's no, like, could you feel a sensation without any sense of a body? If you were to sometimes, this is what I mean about the inquiry of the iceberg. Sometimes the inquiry here was, right, I've been feeling this sensation for so long as a human that's feeling an emotion which has a future date. But what about if I feel this emotion as if I didn't have a body? because there's no evidence in my experience of having a body. So this is what I mean by kind of like a second level, a more intelligent, more informed, with no self approach to the work. Angela, you said to go into just concealed vibration. So ultimately, I just want to say one more thing as well, which really dislodged a lot of frozen emotion for me, which was keeping the cause and the effect in a certain way round. I was still keeping the world as real, as if it wasn't a dream. And I was saying that this had caused this concealed vibration, this repressed thing. And so I was still at the victim of these images on the screen, when really any kind of concealed vibration was always a choice to play small. It's an addiction to smallest, addiction to self. And so sometimes if it feels like you were trying a bit of a dynamic into approaching this work, sometimes look into the cause and the effect. So we think the cause is always outside of us, as if the images actually have any kind of effect on you, which really, when you're truly fearless, the images have no effect, because they're an outpicturing of mind, an outpicturing of what you think you've done, or something like this. So everything, when you really like Christ says, you know, to see only love, be only love. It's really to see only Christ, be only Christ. If we keep thinking we're small, we're less than Christ, we're less than awakened, you're only really gonna be as awake as you believe you deserve to be, and you only receive as much as love as you deserve to be. So now we're in this kind of dynamic, we're loosening it up and just looking into the victim nature. Can you see how sometimes people come and they say, well, I'm feeling this really hardly, I'm feeling, but they're still the problem. And it's not that I have a belief system here. So no matter how many times you feel something, let's say anger, for example, and it's like that they bully me, and so I have to repress my anger, they're the problem. We've got a layer of belief there that's kind of lying dormant, that isn't being approached. So I'm just trying to give you a few ways in that isn't just feeling it. And for some time, I would go kind of flicking between the few. I would just keep looking, where am I putting the cause? Where am I putting the effect? Am I keeping the body as real, the world as real, and trying to heal within this dream? Because really everything we think we're going to find from healing within an unreal dream is really by seeing it as unreal. And my favorite quote from Jesus was, he said, "You are only upset because you see something that is not there." So to keep it as there, to keep, the emotion is here, and I'm a human, I see myself as a human, sometimes that's what's keeping the lid on these sensations. So just a bit of dynamic into that's going to really dislodge it. And just one more encouragement is, do not give up until all the blockages and all the surfacing, because the creepy crawlies will keep coming to the surface, and you'll keep having these doubt storms, like I call them, the big doubt storms, because what these are really these transmutative sensations. These sensations of self, they're like hot coals. So the darker, the more solid the coals, the ones that haven't been looked at for centuries and thousands of years, really burn the brightest and the most blissful when they do transmute. But you're going to have these doubt storms into taking you away from them. So just have that in mind as well, with the context of, it's great to have doubt, but just feeling it, but just don't just keep going until they've all been relieved. And because these are just layers of self, ancient layers.
That's awesome. So there's so much there. I think you might talk almost as fast as I do. I don't know, maybe faster, maybe not. But he just said so much. So I would highly encourage you to watch that back, go through some of those approaches he's talking about, because they're gold. Like, that's really, really insightful.
Yeah, that was so awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
I was just going to say, I recommend a few people, because obviously this isn't ever credit. This is always from, so for example, Scott Killerby's great for really what Scott found was a way to unfreeze these emotions. Because like what he found was a lot of this stuff is unprocessable. It's like just feeling a solid body, like feeling a solid thing that isn't, because when you're really transmuting, and I keep using the word transmute because we're not releasing, we're not getting rid of. You could say release, but it's a letting stay. It almost dies into you. And the fear, all of this fear that we feel inside gets converted into love, the same substance as that. So a lot of the time people are looking for these identity stuff, and the identity stuff is perfect. It's almost like this is even more somatic identity stuff. When you're releasing the sensations, you are releasing self. Like if you were to think of a body right now, let's say two people, one person was here, and another person did a year of somatic work. I know we're making it to a horizontal thing, but let's just think of the difference between the two people. One person will have this very dense, solid feeling body that almost creates the world outside of themselves and therefore their self. Whereas the other person has allowed all of this to come up. There's a lightness there. Then you go into the non-duality that Angelo talks about even further, where there's no feeling of density here, and therefore the world is seen as just a mosaic. This is how it was done for me. There was always a fixation on the bodily sensations, because if we were to say where we're suffering right now, it's not so much, in the distant field that we're looking at. It really is always seemingly here. So why not go to the crux of the problem and relieve it? That's what happened here. And I was realized everything I thought I'd get from keep figuring out a lot of these identity stuff, which I kind of exhausted, and they were so fundamental and beautiful, but the layers of self were now hiding in the unconscious.
Yeah.
I just want to give you one metaphor. I'm really sorry, I know to talk very quickly, but there's a sea, right, of the unconscious. And we've got to think of the teacher I'm with today, Andrew, beautiful teacher, taught me everything in transmutation after Angelo. And what we see of is just because you can't see the piranhas doesn't mean they're not swimming around. And what we start to see is that these piranhas will come up. And so your only job, once these do surface, I'm not talking about when they're frozen, is to almost, because they will be flopping around to start with, because they haven't been coming up for some time. So the temptation is put it back into the sea of duality where they still have fuel. But if you keep them out, if you have the courage to keep them out and keep looking at them, they do slowly stop flopping until they die and into you. And then you just fall in love with transmutation, and it just keeps coming up and up, up and up, all these deeper ancient layers of self over and over again.
I love it. Thank you.
No
There actually, just on the identity thing, there was a moment when I was sort of falling asleep during the retreat, and this thought came up in my head, like, where am I? And I felt that sensation answer, like, very loudly, here. It's like it said here, and somehow I knew that, like, that was it. But it's still it's hard to kind of see it, but that's really helpful stuff. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Jordan. Appreciate it. Okay, let's go to Dimitri.
Hi, Angela. Hi, everyone. I can relate to the previous question very much, and thank you, Matt, for answering it. I do mostly shamatha meditation. Have been doing it for like 2.5 years, and I feel that what's stopping me from progressing is some blocked energy, some blocked emotion. So that was very useful. The question I was going to ask is about direct experience, and specifically in the sense field. A lot of meditation I do is meditation on breathing, on the upper lip sensations. So whenever I feel sensations, there's always an image. It's more easily seen, let's say I meditate and I move my hand, I need to reach for a water bottle. With eyes closed, there is a shadowy image of the hand in my mind space. And the same thing happens when I meditate on the breath. There is an image that I can actually kind of move around, and it actually changed my samadhi. But that's clearly not direct experience. I'm clearly adding mind stuff to that. And when my meditation deepens, usually this image drops, and sometimes I just feel these raw sensations that are nowhere. So my question is how to skillfully deal with those images. I don't want just to deny them. Should I try to just focus on raw sensation, or is it fine that the images are there? And does it depend on what I'm doing? Because when I'm just working on my concentration, maybe direct experience is not that important at that time. So
Yeah, well, all of what you just said is partially true. Sometimes you are just working on concentration, maybe like concentration of attention and consciousness. Then direct experience as far as the sense fields is not important particularly. You can, it really doesn't matter whether there's a visual image in the mind or not. That's true what you said. At the same time, you certainly can clarify the sensation without a visual image. So as an example, like a way to do that right now would be, can you take in all of your body sensation at once, more or less right now? Just feel it, regardless of what else is happening. Just kind of take most of it in, like you're head to toe. You can kind of feel it all sort of tingling or vibrating, like the sensation feeling of being a body. Can you kind of pick that up? Reasonably easy? Good. Now, now you may just keep your attention with the sensations. You may notice that there's an image of your own body, perhaps. Like maybe it's from the front, maybe it's from the side. Who knows what angle that's from? But as you notice the quality of the image, also remind yourself to put your attention fully in that whole body sense, just the sensations. Okay. And that image is okay to be there or not, but we want to primarily keep our attention in the body sensations. Now, keeping our attention in the body sensations, what if you like change the color of your shirt in your mind? And yet the sensations, they don't really change or respond to that necessarily. They just are what they are. What if we make the image in the mind a little dimmer? We're just doing experiments. Make it dimmer, like black and white, maybe, or gray, or just almost translucent. And yet the body sensations, you can do all of that while the body sensations are still noticed fully. You might even get to the point where you only notice like a general shape of the body, even without a visual image, and the body sensations. And you could almost ask yourself, can I just for a moment eliminate the shape of the body image of the mind and just feel the sensations as exactly what and where they are with no specific location? And you might notice more of a cloud experience. Like you might notice it's not so much where it felt like it was before. In fact, the sensation of where maybe loses a little bit of meaning, or maybe loses all meaning. There's just some sensation that's like where doesn't even calculate anymore. You can work in that way, just as an example. You could also, in the same way, just keeping your attention in the sensations, and maybe you imagine a body, you imagine your body. Then all of a sudden you can imagine, say, an apple. You imagine an apple instead of the body, and you just put your attention back to those sensations. And you see, okay, the sensations are quite primary. They just are what they are. They are where they are how they are. But the mind can just make up anything. The mind can imagine this or that. That's just a reflection, or a reflection of an old experience, which is a memory, which is an apple, right? So I think by going back and forth like this, you're I don't know what, your mind, body, whatever, it starts to realize the difference between interpretation and direct experience, such that they kind of go like this more and more, and then the direct experience just gets more and more clear. It's not like there's a goal to make it so that there's never an image in the mind. If you do that, you'll probably be struggling with the mind a little too much. Rather, the goal is to get so attuned to the body experience that you're there all the time, in a sense. And you can also notice the non-dualistic aspects of it, meaning it's really kind of not in a specific place. It's not, it may start to feel like it's loosely centered around something, but much more dilated and vague than when you were really imagining a rigidly structured body. When you're quote unquote thinking about this, when you're like reflecting on the practice but not actually practicing, that's when it'll feel much more solid and much more quote unquote hard to separate, because it becomes intellectual. And the moment it becomes intellectual, the mind's in the prominent position, the body image, the memories, the way you're thinking about it, that will feel much more real. But if you do what I was just kind of pointing to, by sort of really learning to differentiate the two in direct experience right now, and attuning more to the immediate, the direct, the sensations themselves, they will show you what they are more and more. It's just that they've been kind of almost crowded out by the dominance of the mind, let's say, the dominance of imagination. But they're still there, and they're always there, and they'll become more and more vibrant. That's the gist of it, I think, overall. And there's other ways you can do that, of course.
Angelo, and Dimitri, I'd just like to really recommend the video, because Angelo's summed that up so perfectly. And there's an 1.5 hour video from Rupert Spira called "The Body is a Localization of Consciousness," and he does a walkthrough of, for example, the density and looking into dropping the body. And I'm sure Angelo's got the same, if you've got a similar meditation, because he just goes into and it really just drops the body image, because there really is no evidence that these sensations link up with the body. The same with what I said about emotions, where if you remove the story, there's just raw energy. It's the same. And the freedom from dropping the body thought, there'll be a temptation every day, that sensation equals a solid body with a boundary around it. But there's just no evidence except from that which we chose to believe when we were younger. Whenever this idea got laid on, it's really a choice because it feels safe. So to drop the body, again, it's just encouragement. Like, you can fully drop the body thought. You can drop what even hunger means. You can drop what any kind of density, any kind of boundary, any kind of self within these sensations. Just you can even like see that to drop the body is to see that you can't have any thought in the world without first having the body thought as like a main character. So even trying to think of a flower, could you think of a flower without the body? Well, you could say, yeah, I can think of the flower, but you must be in the field looking at the flower. Could you think of, and then that takes, if you drop the body in all emotional stories, there's no problem whatsoever, because who's the main character? It's really such a freeing discovery. So really, I would really recommend you're on the perfect trajectory of just dropping it over and over again. And I remember David Hawkins, you know, the doctor that died in 2012. I remember him he said he just dropped the body thoughts so often that even the eating, like it becomes quite extreme. Like, and obviously it won't be that extreme, but there's just so much freedom in it. I think this is where there's heading for almost everyone. Well, it is everyone if they're willing to look into it. But the 1.5 hour video is really, really good for loosening that grip on the body image.
What's the title of that video? Is it by Rupert Spira, you said?
Yeah, it's called The Body is a Localization of Consciousness, Guided Meditation.
Thank you very much. What if the sensations change when the image change? Because I feel like the intensity changes. Does it mean that that's not the actual sensation, but just kind of a mental echo of the real thing?
I wouldn't overthink that part of it. They're gonna change for sure. Just keep noticing the primacy or the primariness. I don't know if primacy is the right word. I think it is, but the primariness of the sensations in relation to the wholety of your experience, and they will clarify themselves. It becomes, again, non-dualistic at some point, which is very hard to describe what that even means. But it's very easy to know what it is when you experience it, right? So it's all encompassing, engulfing. It's like space stops making sense experientially. You almost feel like you're in two places at once. Sometimes it can shift and change. So if the mind is trying to track, like, is this right? Is that right? Is it changing like this and that? That's the mind's still a little bit in charge there. The thoughts are still a bit in charge. As Matt mentioned, the more you drop that, the more you drop the body, the mind, the processing, and just feel the experience fully, the more it will just be obvious that's where to go. And what's it like? I can't tell you what it's like, because to tell you what anything is like, I'm comparing it to something else. And that's thought. It's always thought. So you just trust it. It is sort of a leap of faith, like so much of this, really. It's a trust that you kind of, it's an intuitive trust, intuitive regard, perhaps.
Can I do it with part of my body sensation? Because I feel like when I'm trying to feel the whole body, it's almost like I'm scanning. This is what I feel here. It's just easier to do in one spot and one sensation.
Totally fine.
That's good. Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Yeah. Okay, let's go to Labina.
Hi, Angelo.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. How
to
are
see
you?
again. I'm good. I'm good. I'm going to share a little bit before I ask my question so I can sort of formulate the question. So since we last spoke, a lot of unraveling happened, and I'm not going to go into the details of it because it feels not relevant. But what I will share is that a fair amount of energetic releases occurred, as well as like what I can only describe as, I guess, stuff happening in with the visual field, but there were experiences where I felt like everything just sort of looked like I was watching a movie more than solid and real. And it would just happen very abruptly. And as it would happen, there would be like this feeling of like ecstasy, almost like that would come in, like bliss ecstasy. And periodically that's been happening where, ecstatic state. But I'm like recognizing that these are experiences that come and go. And then more recently, I feel like a lot of the contraction has resurfaced again. No, every time I talk to you, I'm like, I was doing great. And then there it is again. So a lot of the contraction to the surface, but the difference that I feel is this sense of I doesn't feel like I, it feels like just resistance and nothing else. And the momentum, almost the momentum of the mind that seems to want to like keep going, I almost have this sense like there's nothing I can do about that. And this feeling of like being not in control, and the like a deeper level of surrendering happening, it feels simultaneously heartbreaking and hard and amazing at the same time. That's really the best I can describe it. And but the stories keep coming back, and the sense of like resistance keeps coming like up to the surface. And then almost like the stuff that I thought, oh, this had just like dissolved, is like there again. So I guess the question is, this back and forth that I'm experiencing, is there anything you can say about that?
Hey, Matt, you want me to start, or would you,
Yeah,
you want to start?
go ahead. You start.
Yeah, I just want to connect two threads of what you said. One is, you said at one point, I know these are just experiences. You described that kind of almost like watching a movie, but like dissolved into it. It sounds like quite blissful. And when you say, but that's only an experience, I would hold that lightly, that interpretation of it's only an experience, because at this point, there is a time that it's very helpful to tell people that early on, especially when they haven't had a significant shift in identity, which we have a video evidence that you did last time we talked. So, so for you, I would say, I would ask yourself, is that the experience, or are you the experience? You the one that's collecting the experience? That's the experience. That's real. That's being just dissolved into reality, and that's what you're describing there. Intuitively for me, that also relates to the other thread of what I wanted to pick up on of what you said, and that is that the sense of the I at this point always feels uncomfortable, and it feels like you don't have a choice whether it's there or not. That is very, very clear. You're right on the money. The reason you don't have a choice is because it's not a you. It's not there's no identity there at all. It's an experience or a filter at this level. It's just an experience or a filter. And when that comes in, then it's like analysis, and you remember the quote unquote experiences and all this stuff. And it feel that all that's going on in there is just a little bit of residual will. That's it. And it can't do anything. It might try to do some work. It might try to, surrender, but it's kind of, there's not much it can really do. And that you feel this intuitively. It will just subside more and more and more. If you feel a strong inclination to do some work with emotion at some point on some specific thing, that's fine, of course. If you feel inclined to meditate a certain way, that's fine, of course. But the overarching message for you specifically with this, and having seen where you were recently, is your intuition that feels extra, like not that it shouldn't be there. It's just that it's just an extra unnecessary layer, and you don't have control over when it's there or not. That's the experience. That's the altered state of consciousness that humans call being a human. It will drop out more and more and more. Those other experiences, you can't control whether those happen or not, but those are less experienced more than the experienceless. Those are experiencing reality. Yeah.
Could you say that last part again?
Well, so I just wanted to reiterate that if you're saying to yourself, oh, that was just an experience when I felt kind of merged with everything and it was very blissful and spontaneous and all that. No, that's the selfing trying to get its footing somewhere. It's trying to put its footing in something that can't put footing in because it can't even see it. The ego, let's call it the ego for now, the self structure, it can't even see non-dual realization. It can't see non-dual reality because non-dual reality is something that can't really be accurately reflected. And the most fundamental aspect of the self is a reflection. All it can know is the effects it has on it. And it may like the effect
Okay.
sometimes, and it may not like the effect sometimes. And either way, it'll take a position in relation to that. So it feels like something you need to do, or
I'd
feels
like
like
to
will.
just really quickly add as well,
Yeah.
if we can.
That's it.
Can we see a tracking that kind of comes into place, which the self is very good at? It's kind of like a tracking. It's just a momentum that we all have. Like it's a kind of, we try and barter with the awakening process. It's like, if I feel this enough, and then this, and then this. And I think we just need to kind of give way to this devotion, which is, I'm willing to stay with whatever, whenever, for however long. And it's really beautiful to see this just willingness to go into it, and we can just start to ramp up the I call it devotion, but I know that's got a lot of religious terms, but it's really a willingness to be with something forever. And we start to fall in love with the cycles. So I call it like a transmutative cycle, where you have a blissful release. There will be the lid off the creepy crawlies, and then all the creepy crawlies will come up, the images will come back. The mind has so many tricks up its sleeve to make you go back into the self, back into figuring things out. We start to fall in love with these cycles. So I remember at first, like we say, with these sensations that come up, the energy releases, they're very blissful, and then the darker ones come up. It's basically a test in a way each time. Are we going to go back into self, into trying to get, like, feeling it, to get rid of it, the identity stuff, or are we going to just keep basically devoting ourselves to this? I remember a sage or a saint, he said, like, he spent 5 lifetimes just working on patience, for example. It's like just this attitude that we're building. So it's just beautiful to see the willingness, and just keep up that. Basically you're decreasing your resistance every day, and we don't want to fall into the trap, which is really the agenda of, like, if I do this, then I'll feel better, or this or that. And you just fall in love with surrender and letting go, rather than tracking and trying to feel better, because everything that's coming up is like fuel for bliss. So we start to have a mind training that happens, where we don't see these sensations as bad anymore, and we don't really believe the images, because we've been in that place so many times before. Maybe, like, gets to the point where we just, I remember, like, someone saying how much stuff they had inside, and I remember thinking, like, well, if I could have that, I could convert into, it's just this attitude, which is great, that's just unfolding within you, just to keep going into that direction, and seeing it as every time it comes up, it's a great opportunity. It's a great indicator that you've allowed an identity to come up, and this is going to come into your experience. So just see it as like a wonderful opportunity each time the images come and the sensations come, the temptation comes to figure it out and make it into a self, into whatever. It's just a really good indicator.
Thank you for saying that, and thank you for mentioning the word devotion, because that's kind of something that's been coming up more and more as this is happening or unraveling, where there's just, if I see anything, it's not going to make sense. But thank you for saying that.
No, beautiful. This is what it is. As you were saying there, it's really, you're finding the place within you that already knows how to face everything, because everything that you already, like, there's nothing outside of you. So every time we show up each day, you're actually, the capacity to face things seems to be getting bigger, like the capacity of yourself to show up, because all you're doing is really buying a ticket to show up and not close your eyes. That's all you're doing. Like, you're showing up, the images will come on the screen, the sensations will pull you down, but the capacity to face it all will get to the point where there's nothing that will take you away from the screen anymore. And the needing to have an identity structure, the needing to sort it out, just falls away. And we all know how relaxing and relieving it feels to not go back to that after some time, because you realize it actually takes more effort to suffer eventually, because it takes so much effort to have to blame game, to create the identity. Like, it's actually exhausting. So there's this kind of like mountaintop bit where you kind of tip over the momentum, and eventually you just see, why would I put more energy into a self structure? It actually takes more energy to blame the images, to actually think there's a story to work out. I might as well just stay still, complete stillness, and it just converts in that kind of container of stillness.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Angelo.
You're welcome. Thank you. Let's go to Anne.
Sorry about that, just trying to unmute. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Great. Hi, Angelo. Hi, Matt. Yeah, and it's an amazing retreat, absolutely. I just couldn't believe the level it quickly took me to. And then just like the last retreat afterwards, I was like, oh, right, well, I'm just going to stay in this mode all week. I've got the time. I don't work. I'm going to do meditation, listening to talks. And that didn't happen, which shows me I've got no will in this game of life. And I think, I'm sort of panicking as everyone's speaking, because it's just how things just go too fast for me sometimes, and particularly after the retreat. And there's so many influences, like, oh, I'll listen to this, I'll listen to that, I'll listen to that. And I really love them all. They're so interesting. I'm just listening to The Power of Now again, which I read 10 years ago, and hearing it in a completely different way. But it's almost like I haven't got enough time for everything. And there are so many questions coming up of like, is this the right thing, or this the right thing? And then when I'm in a talk, there's so much information and pointers in talks. It's like, oh, I'm going to have to listen to this again for all this information. And also you mentioned about speaking quickly. And when you and Matt were speaking at that speed earlier, I was like, it was just frazzling my mind, It's like, oh my God, that is so fast. And I'm not sounding very clear. I did write things down, and then that was all muddled. And there's just so many influences. I'm like, on so many levels, like I'm listening to you, then something comes up from Eckhart Tolle, or, some different wavelength, or something from my 12-step program, or then praying and back into devotion, which I've tapped into again. It's like, oh my God. And then I'll go into meditation, and sometimes it's like samadhi, and I just do
Can I
not
just say
know.
one thing? Can I just say one thing really quickly, because it could like direct the question in a way as well. We can just prune away everything that doesn't matter in one go. Like we can just let's just, because I know what you're going through, and I know the complexities, and really it's nothing outside of ourselves. Usually we actually want to make this complex because it means we don't have to look at the root. So, and that's not a blame game, that's just because I've seen it in myself. Like we can make it complex usually, and there is so much out there, and it's so easy to get into the momentums, but let's just make it so simple, because the truth is so simple, and it's ourselves that make it complex. That's the root of the self. There's a feeling of separation that never occurred, it never happened. You have no ability to separate yourself out from the universe. That's it. So now all we're dealing with is the momentum of a belief that we're separate, and we can cut away anything that tries to create a practice otherwise. If you want the root of the problem, then we've just got the belief in I am a separate individual. So we can just cut away anything there, and just look into any evidence of anything that says otherwise. And people still think, well, that's too simple. It's not. It only becomes more complex if you're not willing to look at the root again and again and again, which seems to have all these complex different ways in reactivity and the feeling of the body and stuff. But you can always just ask the same question, whether you're doing emotion work or anything. It's really just that one root. And then usually we get kind of overwhelmed, but that's not so much anything outside of our own choice to overwhelm ourselves with information and stuff. And I remember just thinking it was so simple, and then getting scared by how this can be done in this lifetime, it can be done tomorrow. It's like this is a message of like doability. This is so possible for anyone, and it can be so much more simple.
Right, yeah. I mean, there's two things I love. One is my 12-step program, and the basis of that is that you're powerless and keep it simple and things like that. when I had what I think was my first awakening, that was with the sort of Tony Parsons lineage. So to me, that was very simple. You know, I saw an opening and the emptiness of everything, and that was very simple for a while. So I get what you're saying, Matt. I feel I need just to get that core thing back, or that core thing clear. But even when you're saying that, I don't know then what to do with what you've said. I don't know. When you're saying, obviously the core of it is separation, and that's why I'm listening to things. But when you're dealing with things on so much level, you know, 1 minute there's trauma coming up, the next minute you're having like these incredible realizations and insights, and then you like, who do I listen to? It's all so good. I'm still there, you know, like you're saying keep going to the core of it. What do you mean by that? How do you do that?
Yeah, I
Like
think
before, when it was the Tony Parsons thing and that awakening, I can't remember it, but it's like all I kept doing was checking in with this like emptiness, and like, yeah, it's still there, yeah, it's still there, yeah, it's still there. And like Angela was talking earlier, there was always that background of whatever craziness was going on. That background was always there. It's like, it's okay, this is here. And now it's not as clear as that.
Yeah, beautiful. Sometimes as well, we can start just with context, if that's okay, Andrew. Just with, instead of like, because sometimes a question isn't so much a question, it's more a statement. And you can, if we decipher this question down, it's kind of like I can't do this, or I'm overwhelmed by this, is really what is in between the words of that question. And first of all, let's just put to bed what we're really after, because we have the question on the surface of, you know, I'm overwhelmed, I don't know what to do, and I give you so many answers, and it's just kind of spiraling out, and you can see the energy of this. But just from this perspective, and I'm interested in Angela as well, is first of all just see that inevitably you are going to wake up. Like, enlightenment is inevitable because you aren't separate. It's just a momentum of feeling separate. So there's no way that you can't wake up. It's your only choice is whether you want to delay that, if you want to dig your heels in. So we can just start to ease up the rush, you know, this rush. You can't. What it's like is you're in a field that has no fences. You're in a boundless field and you think you're in a fence, and all we're doing is walking around and not noticing any boundaries anywhere. We're seeing that we've never left this field of no self. We've never left this field of really it's of pure love, and we really feel like there's something to figure out. And really, I can sense in your question is kind of this urgency to do it now and to deal with all the trauma that comes up. And there will be answers for sure, but just if I can just give a kind of element of surrender, and because the answers are within you. The teacher, you're looking for like Tony Parsons for when this comes up, and then this for this, but start to listen to this inner voice, which is really, you can only hear it in silence because that voice only whispers. So when you're doing all of this, trying to figure things out, you can't hear the whisper, which is really just saying, stop, you're already home. You don't. Sometimes trying to figure something out is creating the problem as well. So I would just come from that attitude. It just started this surrender. So what Angelo taught me very beautifully was that this whole work as well is a marriage between inquiry and surrender. And it feels like you're very heavily on the inquiry, but there isn't that release of surrender, which is, there's a marriage. It's the blending of love and wisdom. It's wisdom.
To say there, Matt, I'm completely the opposite. I'm not very good at inquiry at all. Right. And because I've practiced surrender so much in a 12-step program, it's all about surrender. It's all about surrendering to higher power, God, you know, that there is only that energy, that's the only thing that exists, and everything else is well, as we say here, the illusion, you know. It's just, I suppose it's just like, you know, and I don't really listen to the Tony Parsons stuff anymore, but I suppose, you know, like like say on the retreat, and Angela was mentioning about what is moo, and I've really kind of ignored that before because I've no idea what moo is, and like, why am I going to do something that's saying what is moo? But I thought, but I just started doing it, and that felt really good. That felt like I'm just going to stay with this, and then I keep changing my mind, and it's like I just need one thing. Like
Sure.
you were saying, that core root, that's just that one thing, you know, to
Yeah, this is
stay with.
discernment. Yeah, I would just say really quickly. So we said about the marriage between love and wisdom and inquiry and surrender. Now look at the marriage between the masculine and the feminine within you, because the masculine is like a discernment that just faces things, and that it's a real beat of the drum. And what people sometimes don't have is the balancing between the masculine and the feminine approach to this work. So like you've very clearly pointed out, that you have this surrender, the devotion there. It's a very feminine energy, and it's really the energy of awakening. Awakening is a very feminine awakening. But if you don't have that beat of the drum of discernment, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to face what I need to face, and I might not know what I'm doing, but I'm going to keep taking steps into the mist, into the fog. You've got this incredible willingness to surrender, but if you don't have the discernment of the masculine, it's not going to really have a direction to go within. It's going to sort of just be, I'm going to surrender to this outside world. And it's, you just have the encouragement that you can do this. It really is a discernment as well, to just keep doing the work and every day turning up.
Yeah. Okay. And what about you, Angelo? What would you?
Yeah, I mean, you guys covered a lot already. So my just overall sense, like a lot of times I just come from my gut instinct on how the whole expression of you is presenting, at least in this moment. The three things that came up in your own words more than once, that I could probably put together, or that I just want to reflect back to you. One is like, I don't know what to pay attention to, like tracking. It's like you're trying to track, like, what do I listen to? There's too much. Like, is it this? Is it that? Is it this? I would question that. Do you need to track anything? What makes you think you need to track anything? If you listen to me, great. If you don't, great. If you listen to birds, great. If you don't, great. But why does it matter? Is there a belief there that says I need to know what to focus on and pay attention to? Which, if you look really closely at it, it's kind of saying, at least to some degree, I don't trust the process itself, right? Like you said, I'm very good at surrender, and I think you're telling the truth, but I know exactly what Matt meant when he said too much inquiry, not enough surrender. There's still this, like, it's like you probably have surrendered in very broad ways in your life, in very specific ways, but there's something that's still like not quite surrendering fully to this, meaning it doesn't matter if you're practicing or not. It doesn't matter if you listen to this teacher or that teacher, because the moment you close your eyes, you know you're already there, period. You don't need to think about it. You don't need those words. It's just that obvious. And it is that obvious to everyone, including you. And then something in the mind can get revved up and go, oh, wait, but I don't know what to pay attention to. And sometimes if you believe that one thought, like that can really take you on a ride. So the whole idea of having to track what do I pay attention to? What's important? What's not? Just notice that's just a function of mind. It's an apparatus can make a lot of noise. You might get on that train and you might not get on that train. But as Matt pointed out several ways, it's already here for you. It's already here. That's one thing. The other thing was like, I don't know who to listen to. It's similar to the first one, but it's a little bit more about authority. Like I sense that you don't feel like you have the authority to just be the realization. It's like you maybe a little bit believe there's still some special thing about Eckhart Tolle or me or Tony Parsons or someone else, or like trying to figure out which one should I listen to. I don't think you should listen to any of us. Not primarily. You should listen to your own heart primarily. That's what I think. So it's like really just trusting yourself. I think you're probably past a lot of the part of this where you have to really figure out what practice, what teacher, what should I do? Like, I think you're kind of past that. You're to this point where what you're really called to do is just trust the simple moment to moment presence. And if you need a practice here and there, you'll kind of intuitively know how to go figure it out. Do I need to work with somebody? Do I need to do some emotion work? But generally speaking, you should really see if there's any belief there that undermines the deeper truth that this is already completely accessible for you at all times, even when it feels obscured, even when there are thoughts, even when there are emotions, you still just intuitively know it's there. And I know you do actually, but it's just a little more like notch that up a degree of trusting yourself. That's my overall message. Does that
that's definitely. And as you were speaking and you did, that's the word you used at the end, I was going to reflect back to you from what you said. So you're talking, it's trust, isn't it? It's the trust.
Yeah.
And just keep going back to that. And I think there's just some panic coming up.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm doing it wrong, or it won't be the right way. It's just trusting that, and then, trusting that life, God, energy, universe, consciousness, whatever you want to call it, is the power in this, is doing itself, I think. So, and there's no right and wrong in that. So there was some other key words that I wanted to remember, but I can't, so I'm left with trust and surrender. Keep trusting and surrender. Yeah,
you can always watch this back.
Yes, exactly. I've got
so
many.
The last thing I'll say, and the last thing I'll say, I forgot to say it when I knew there was a third thing, but one is that just came to me, and I'm trying to make it very simple because I think you're asking for simplicity, and you're right, because this is more than simple. But one is, in my book somewhere, I say like 95% practice, 5% information or knowledge or whatever. That's not an exact number, but it is for some people. It's an adjustment for some people who do have this challenge of like, they're just kind of information junkies. They're watching videos constantly. They're trying to, some people don't do that, but they're trying to read book after book after book and doctrine and talking about it online. But why? Like, it's right here. So sometimes it's just like, turn down the number of videos you watch and the stuff you read and listen to, and sit more in silence. And it may be intense. Like, you may be feeling emotions of like, oh, I don't know what to do. I need to find someone to listen to. Wait a minute. That's just a little bit of lack of trust in myself. Oh, can I sit with lack of trust in myself for a few minutes and just feel what that feels like? Then, the more you just sit, the more you'll realize like, you don't need all the resources, really. You are the resource.
Yeah, I think that's at the root of it, isn't it? That there is actually probably an emotion at the root of it that I'm following, like a panic, or I've got to do this, I've got to listen to this, I've got to, what about that one, what about that one, what about that one? And I think it's probably getting to the core of that.
Yeah,
just well, or looking at that that's taking me away from just this,
that's
trusting
right.
This. Yeah.
Nothing's taking you away from it, but trying to figure out how to get back to it makes you feel like it is. So just sit, really, just sit, just give yourself a little more time, just adjust your schedule a bit, or adjust how much time you maybe sit in silence with no distraction, just feeling whatever comes up, sitting in presence, sitting in consciousness, however you meditate, but just trusting yourself, letting yourself deeply know that you have what you need already.
Thank you so much, both of you. I will listen to it back. That's amazing. And I hope I haven't taken up too much of everybody's time. That was a long one, but much appreciated. You really hit the nail on the head there. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Okay, let's go to Amber.
Hi, Angelo. Hi, Matt. So I was on your retreat, the past one, and it was a really great experience. I feel like I processed so much, and there was just so much going on, like emotionally, like a lot of emotional turmoil. Like, I feel like I experienced every possible emotion you could experience, and it just felt endless. And I'm just kind of feeling kind of lost right now. I think like during your Q&A, I'd asked you about control, and I'd been kind of like inquiring into that. And I feel like I can see that there's no one in control here. Life is showing me over and over and over again, you are not in control. There's no one in control. But I feel like I haven't seen that deeply enough. And so I'm just I just don't know where to orient. And I've just been kind of asking, what is here? What is actually here? What is really here? And I feel like that's helping, but I just feel like I can't trust myself to just stay there and just kind of let go into that. And yeah, I'm just kind of lost, If that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, it does. Matt, do you have anything to say? Or you want me to start?
Yeah,
Or?
maybe I could quickly just add what my perspective is, just because the free will stuff is so freeing. When you see it from like when it matures, it's more like there's no control, but there's all the choice. But it's really a choice it's not like a character choice. You just have an intention, really. Eventually, there's just an intention to either open or to close, and the free will aspect. Loads of people sometimes maybe get into like debates about free will, and I can already see that this isn't so much a heady thing for you. It's very much you've noticed this control aspect come up, and the freedom that comes from just surrendering control is so much sweeter than ever having control, because ultimately, like we keep saying, we've never had control. It's not like we're going from those that have control into those that don't, and then you're enlightened. You're basically waking up to what's already the case. So whether you see that or not doesn't change whether we have free will. Like it's a beautiful discovery. That's the same thing with waking up. Like no one's really so much changing in any way. It's just opening your eyes to what's already here. So when you open your eyes, you're not really struggling with the free will aspect. And if I give a pointer into this, just notice how things happen by themselves, but also the agency in the middle, the little person that we think is behind the eyes. It's so freeing to just give up these beliefs of having agency, having control. But again, with the questions, we can also see, like, if we listen to the space between the question, it's like the free will stuff. It's always like, how do we feel better? Because ultimately, this is a great thing, because we want to feel better. This is the whole point, because without having the sense of control, it's so much more freeing. You just see things. Choices are made. I say that they're made by spirit. When spirit's coming through, there's no agency, because the belief in agency, the belief in free will, is basically just blocking that view, and it's so exhausting to believe in. It's so heavy. It's like we've got this big backpack on with all these big stones in the background, and free will is a big rock in that, to think that we have to figure things out. And it's more, like I say, the best way to surrender these beliefs is it's not out of what's the word, this kind of aggressive approach to really trying to get through it. Just taste how sweet it feels to not have control. Like how sweet it feels to have something in your face so shouting at you to try and make a decision in terms of like some kind of a control, some kind of way that you're going to make yourself feel better, and just start to notice the capacity again in yourself to not have to control. And you realize it's kind of like a fist that closes up. But over time, you'll just keep the fist open, which is really the only choice you have, again, back to the either opening or closing. You kind of stay open, and you never go back to that exhausting identifying with a controller, because every time you identify with a controller, you're now at the effect of having some kind of, firstly, credit, but also you're at the effect of everything that comes with thinking you have free will, which is, again, very exhausting. Just encouragement, again, just it loosens on its own, and the sweetness of losing control is really a trust that builds. And I keep coming back to, it's only because maybe a devotion thing has come through in the last year, where there's just been this real opening, the heart's opened, and there's just such a trust in, and I use the word God, but it really is a spirit that everything's figured out, everything's taken care of, and anything that we do is really just a denial of that truth. And it's just so sweet to let go deeply. I'll be interested to see what Angelo says as well.
Yeah, you covered a lot, I think. I'll make like an analogy for you, Amber. It's either way, it doesn't matter what, the experience you're having right now after retreat is not uncommon. It will sort of naturally integrate as it typically does. We're only a couple days out. But the thing about free will is, like, we could talk about it metaphysically. It can certainly be realized in a very direct way. But as Matt said, it has a sweetness to it. And even if it's not fully realized and clarified in the immediate experience right now, that's okay. It doesn't have to be. The analogy I want to make is like, it's something energetically like, if you ever see like the scuba dive, or like you're at the beach and you see the seaweed that comes out of the bottom of it's like growing out of the bottom of the ocean, but it like moves up, and as the water sways, the seaweed just sways with it. It's distinct from the water, but it's also completely at the mercy of the water. Every square millimeter of that seaweed surface is touching water, and the water is the whole of the ocean, moving based on waves across the world and based on local waves and changes in the temperature and wind, and all of it is affecting the tides, and the moon is affecting the tides. All of that's affecting everything else, right? But the experience that the mind interprets of being the body is, I'm just that piece of seaweed, which is fine, even from the perception of being the piece of seaweed, which is a limited perspective. But even from that perception, you can appreciate the beauty of just swaying with the entirety of the ocean. You can actually feel that with this moment, that helps, I think, to like just allow it to dissolve or settle into the body, that insight that is there, even if it's not fully like clarified in the experience moment to moment. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps a lot, actually. I just had one other thing about, I guess it's related to control. I think like there's just this fear because life just feels inherently unsafe. And I feel like if I let go of that control, something terrible is going to happen to me or my family or loved ones. I'm just so worried that like life is just going to throw something at me to try to wake me up, and it's going to be awful. Yeah, I just don't know what to do about that fear.
Yeah, it's not uncommon at all, by the way, and that fear is already there. The more mind identified, let's say, a person is, the more unaware they are that fear is there, but the more that fear controls them, actually. So that's at the bottom of a lot of this, is exactly what you just said. But I'll say this: I just want to offer one observation I've made in the way this process is. And it goes back up to what Matt's brought up a couple times, where if you really look and are willing to question the fundamental belief about cause and effect, we believe that that I'm fearful because the world is unsafe and so forth. But the truth is, it's actually quite the opposite. It's that I believe the world is unsafe causes the fear. That the illusion isn't out there; it's in here. If that helps. Or the appearance even of a world at all, appearance of separation, appearance of unsafety, comes from the fear. And the fear naturally or simply arises out of the sense of being separate from everything. So it's actually quite the opposite as far as the ontology of those experiences we have. The reason that can be helpful is because if it's out there and it's the entirety of the world, and I'm this little speck of sand, that's that just feels daunting already. It feels insurmountable, and it would be insurmountable if that was true. Luckily, it's not quite like that. What seems like this vast world is just a bunch of thoughts, right? And the underlying fear that seems to be radiating from the truth of the outside world isn't at all. The fear is something based on something quite internal, very deeply buried. And it's the source of that sense of there being an external world that's problematic and I have to manage it. So the truth of it is, you don't have to manage anything. It's okay. Like really all of this is okay, even when it doesn't feel like it's okay.
Could I just add as well, just adding on to Angelo's point, because he hits the nail on the head in terms of we can keep the world as real and try and kind of work it out within the dream. But ultimately, and this is going to go just like kind of just into the like really the root, which is, you and I, myself and Angelo, we're ancient friends that have never been separated. And what feels strange is the fact that we have free will. What seems strange is that there's a world outside of ourselves. That's what feels dangerous. And we put it the other way around. It's like, no. What feels strange is that the world is going to attack me. But what we see is that you're being really, and I don't mean memory by your brain, but you have such a distinct memory of pure love that didn't have any sense of control, that all of this world, this is why it feels so claustrophobic to have control. And that's why the memory's so bright in your mind, and the memory's so bright in all of our really the being's mind of what it was like to not have control. That's why you go out seeking. And that's why Eckhart Tolle really relates at first. This is why most of the other people just, it's a timing thing. They're not, the ancient memory isn't as brightly in their mind, that really there's something more than this. And I remember Ramana Maharshi saying, once you taste that love, which is just this seamless remembrance of what it was like to be not, to see yourself as not separate, you'll do anything to get that back. So what you're going through right now is the seeing that this just feels so strange to feel like I have to track and decide and control, and anything that I decide will then have an effect. But you are the effect. So yourself is the effect, and the cause. It's a strange concept. It's the other way around. It's just keep with that, because we all know that this is so strange to feel like you're a separate self, and the memory is getting brighter and brighter in your mind, and eventually you just kind of sit down in the field of seamless love, and the dream world doesn't have that pull. You don't need to have the characters on the screen. You don't need to have the body. You don't need to have free will, because you remember what it was like previously to being seemingly chosen to come into this floating rock that we call Earth and put a world out there. Like, this is what feels strange, and that's what you've highlighted really well. But just note that it's so much more freeing, and everything you're after is really the surrendering of that. It takes effort to keep up the free will and the thing. So yeah, to keep it up, basically.
Thank you so much. Just to have something to orient to, should I just continue asking like what's here, just kind of orienting to what's actually here and see where that goes?
What are you inclined to do? What's your
I
instinct?
have no idea. I've been back and forth over and over again between different questions, and I just feel like that's the simplest thing, just because it has to be here. There's nowhere else it can be. So
good. Yeah, that's fine. And when you ask the question, if you find an experience that is more real than the thought world, right? More, even if it's ineffable in a lot of ways, stop there. Don't keep asking, and you know what I mean? Like, let the question lead you into something just a bit more clear.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you both so much. Thank you.
You're very welcome. All right, let's go to Will.
Hi, Angelo. Hi, Matt. I just want to say, I want to say thank you to Angelo for the retreat. It was a trip for sure. It was my second retreat with you, and the third retreat I've done this type of retreat. I've done one in person as well, and I felt a shift in this one. I just going to say my experience real quick. I used the inquiry more this time, and I can't. It's somewhat easy for me to get into the sensations of my body. That I can do, but when I did the what am I, or where am I, it just it was like putting my foot on the pedal, kind of in a car. It just the energy just amped up right away and just kind of widened. And then it was the first time also that I really, when the thoughts would come up, I would just say just a thought, and it would just go back in to the space. And after Violet's, the sound meditation the first night, right away I was able to get into the sound and my body, like it being one and being everything and being nothing, and I was able to bring that. Then that also just started happening day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. The sound was pretty easy for me to kind of bring together, and the vision I didn't really, but there was points where everything got really small. It felt like really small to like a dot, including the vision, and then I would just come back. So those things all happened. And it was all really because of using the inquiry and just the thoughts. And also on the 3rd and 4th day, I started saying also at times, what am I afraid of? What am I afraid of? To try and just go, and I could feel like a deepening. just a couple of, I didn't get any samadhi. I mean, it was really like each sit was like going into a battle for me. I sat on a cushion for the whole thing. I don't know if that's, maybe it's my ego, but like a part of me feels like if I sit on a cushion, it's more difficult. I can create more equilibrium through the adversity. I don't know if that's true or not, but kind of like I was in a lot of discomfort at times. And also my neck, I was very much, the pressure was, it was nearly always on my head. Like there was like a lot of like energy coming out of my head, but all my neck would tighten so tight all the time, just squeeze like so tight, and it was like my head was going to explode. And then it would open up, and it would be like it would be like a wide open gap here that you could put your fist through. That's what it felt like. And then it would tighten again. But I like, I'm much more like the head, like it feels like, you know, one question I kind of do have is like, I feel like what brings me out, like I find it very hard to connect with people. I found it very hard to hear the poetry. It took me like until the fourth night to actually be able to hear it, because I just kept going out. I kept going out. It was very, I just couldn't. But in the meditations, I could stay. But when like other people, I kept going out. And in life, I'm realizing, I know I'm going on here, but in life, I'm realizing that what brings me out more than anything else is me feeling superior or inferior to other people. And at times it's very subtle, but it seems to be there nearly all the time. I either feel bigger or smaller. And I don't know if there's any way to work with that besides like saying just the thought. And yeah, and also I'm beginning, the vision is today for like I don't feel great. I'm really tired. I'm not sleeping good, but I feel like it's the best thing I ever did, you know. But also the vision is beginning to flatten a little bit too. So I don't know. That's kind of my rant.
Matt, you got anything?
Probably just something very quickly which I resonated with deeply, was the other people, and like you say, the reactivity. And I would say one insight that came here was superiority and inferiority are really the same thing. They're the same flip side of the same coin. They just solidify a sense of self and an other. And really the word is specialness. And that's not saying to you, this is just the human being is an attempt of specialness. That's all it is. We all want this, we crave it until we see how painful it is to have that. And this is where the rubber hits the road. Like life is just going to throw up so much, and it's the other people, it's the sense of other, which is really the gold mine. It's this relationship kind of dynamic, and every single time we're surrendering the temptation to either put ourselves above or below, like I said, it's the same exact thing. It's very neutral really in what's going on. It's just the same sense of solidifying a self, because if I can say other, then it means that I can be safe within my boundaries. To surrender into this sameness, because sameness is really a term that may not be used as much, but really that's what we're all ultimately looking for, is this utter sameness, which is so panicking to the ego. And it's this willingness to let go of the specialness. You see it a lot in forums. It's like a need to be right, a need for superiority. And there's really a surrendering into the heart, which is like a relaxation of this, because it's so painful. Like you said, this lack of connection, this exhaustion of putting other out there becomes too much. But the world itself, the interactions become the fuel. There's so much fuel. And I keep bringing this back to Jesus, but Jesus once said, the fields are ripe with harvest, but the laborers are few. So anywhere you go, the field is a complete gold mine of awakening fuel. But it doesn't mean that, you know, out of the 7 billion, how many of us are using these interactions as ways to wake up? So just be one of the laborers that is willing to utilize this resistance, this sense of other, and it will catapult you. Like those that stay on the cushion really are dealing with 1% of what can come up. And it's just, you just use it, and you become excited when there's I remember like having such dormant energies, and then suddenly having such triggering when I went outside and realized this is my chance. Like it was keep coming up. So just see it as a good sign again. And yeah, it's just my sort of my perspective.
Yeah, I keyed in on the same thing Matt did, actually, is basically the last thing you said of being, I feel above people or below people. And exactly what Matt said. I was going to say something like, whether you feel above or below people, you're going to feel below. You're going to feel separate. You're going to feel distant, disconnected. So those, maybe I could say those, I don't know, jockeying for position or something, those movements, whether it's above or below, they really are saying the same thing. And it's just kind of saying like, whoa, like backing off from people, pushing them away, pushing yourself into subjectivity. Now, with that said, I want to really emphasize, it doesn't mean you're doing that on purpose. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong at all. It's actually a habit. And habits are often, especially deeply ingrained emotional habits, are often empathically impressed upon us when we're young. We learn them unconsciously very, very frequently. So this has nothing to do with who you are on a moral system or anything like that. And it doesn't have to do with what you chose. It's just what's happening essentially. But being aware of it is good. Ultimately, seeing that it just doesn't deliver the goods. The idea is like, oh, if I back off from people, if I can judge them, keep them at a distance, I'll feel better. Like somehow I'll feel safer or something. But what you see, and then if I feel safer, I'll feel okay. I'll feel better. I'll feel at peace. That's the part that's not true. It actually makes you feel less at peace. It makes you feel less settled, and it makes you feel on guard with when anyone's around, or even if you think about people, even they're not around. You can be alone and you imagine going to have to interact with that person tomorrow and so forth. You'll just always feel at a distance and like this. So again, it's totally innocent. You didn't choose this, but the mechanism of it, being aware of it is helpful, because just being aware of that and seeing, okay, that doesn't really deliver peace. In fact, it kind of does the opposite. See it, feel into it. Maybe you'll even feel into what's underneath it of like, whoa, I actually have a fear of people. Like, I'm not saying this is you. I'm saying that could come up, an emotion that this mechanism is being used to just sort of avoid. And then you might feel that emotion. It's like, oh, wow, that was heavy. That was intense. Might be there for a day or two. And on the other side of it, you might feel just a little less tendency to even preoccupy yourself with that above and below stuff. You might find it's a little easier to interact with people. So I might put my attention in that aspect of your question, because that did stick out to me as well. But overall, I mean, these very difficult retreats, even physically painful retreats, they happen. The value is there. The work you've done, and you do a lot of work when you keep yourself on the cushion in those painful retreats. That's hugely valuable, not only to you, but to all of us. So I want to congratulate you for that. It can take weeks to really unpack that, or even see that the value of that. It could take longer, but there is value there, and it is of benefit. So go easy on yourself, relax a little bit. But if you find yourself preoccupied with that pushing and pulling on people sort of thing, just look into it and just realize that mechanism doesn't deliver the goods.
All right. Thank you both. I really feel like some sort of peace I'm feeling, I think is attainable for the first time in my life. So I feel very blessed.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Glad to hear that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, let's go to Brian.
Okay. So I was also on the retreat, and thank you very much for offering it, Angelo. And I saw that Violet Synergy's here, and so thank you also, Violet. And thanks also to you, Angelo, and to Matt for being here tonight. And thanks for your time and your wisdom and your compassion. Okay, so there's some nervousness. And I think I've realized that it's interesting, because one of the big themes of tonight for me, I think, was it's a lot about the feminine energy and letting go, and sorry, I just read Violet's. So it's about the feminine energy and trusting and letting go and opening. And that's been really difficult in my experience. I haven't been able to do that much And I think something shifted for me on your retreat. I kind of, I don't know, I'll never know really. The eye contact with you, Angelo, and the sound meditations and the exercises you offered about writing down fears and what I want out of awakening. And there were, I think there just were so many factors. So I'll never really know. I'm sure it's all there in the subconscious, but I did, I let go a little bit, and since the retreat, I can feel like, I think for the first time in my life, like the whole body is vibrating. Like the whole body is buzzing, vibrating. It doesn't, it's actually quite pleasant. It's not a problem. And I've, you know, my root tradition is Vipassana. So I've done, you know, a dozen of these 10-day silent retreats. So I'm used to feeling sensation, but this is a new level, and it's just this vibration. But there's still the difficulty for me has been just fear, just loads and loads of fear. And I'm still experiencing it. And it's interesting over the years. I mean, I don't remember these sorts of things, but I have like journal entries full of psychedelic induced experiences and and meditation induced experiences where I saw that there is no fear and there's nothing to fear. And there's just, as you say, there's just this. That's the best way I could put it. And so I've been thinking that, I don't know, it's funny that Matt offered that Rupert meditation, because I came from Rupert. I've been with him for the past few years, and I'm very new to you, Angelo, and I'm just meeting you, Matt. And that authenticity bit and that emotional work and the shadow work is that's very Angelo. I didn't see a lot of that when I was paying attention to Rupert's offerings. So now I'm thinking to begin exploring that. And I wanted to go back. I wrote down just a couple notes. I wanted to say to everyone on the call that I related so much to what almost all of you shared. The retreat was very difficult for me. Amber, I have the same issue, that like this fear of awakening, that I'm just gonna die. So there's a lot of, I can relate to a lot of that. And one question that I had was going back, hearkening all the way back to Jordan's question. You know, I'm wondering what kind of shadow emotional work modalities you two recommend. And Matt said named a guy named Scott Killaby. I don't know if I got the spelling right. I don't know who that is. And Angelo, you mentioned TRE a couple times on the retreat. I thought that was significant that you mentioned it multiple times, and I started practicing it today. It's another one of those things I don't think I'll ever know if it's working, but the body was definitely, you know. So I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah, the shadow work is an interesting thing in that it happens like on two. It happens in sort of two. I don't want to say phases because that sounds different than what I'm trying to say. It happens on two completely different scopes. Let's say one scope is the personal, where you go out and do, or you go in and do shadow work. You learn a modality, maybe TRE, which is very directly somatic, which I think it's just very valuable. But you may do something more direct. There's Scott Killaby inquiries. There are many ways to inquire into emotion. My book chapter has a bunch of approaches. Byron Katie has like an app you can use to look at specific beliefs. You can do like EMDR type of practices around things. There's so many good modalities now. You can work with a therapist. You can work with a sort of non-duality aware therapists, perhaps they're out there and stuff. And if you look around, you can just work with a good friend who's clear, who's interested in the stuff you're interested in, has experience you have, and do some kind of vulnerable practice with self-inquiry around emotions, or inquiry around emotions. So there's a lot of ways to do shadow work. You can do it through art. You want to feel intense emotions, try to do some art, do some painting, do like learn a new technique, and then like give yourself to the intuitive process of creation, and find that friction point between like a practice or technique or some way of doing something, and just letting your body just move and create art. Like do performance type stuff, take an acting class, do improv. All these ways can access like shadow stuff, shadow material, put yourself in situations that are uncomfortable. That's one side of shadow work, and it's really wonderful. Once you start being willing to do that kind of stuff, it's really a fun but also terrifying thing. It's just all the things that have to do with diving into the emotion body. But there's a whole other whole other side to it, and it's really what life does to you. Life just sorts you out. It puts you in situations you could never imagine, puts you in challenging emotional landscapes around people. It's often around other people that have certain patterns that trigger your patterns or family patterns. You may be put into a situation where you're kind of compelled, even morally, to like confront somebody or confront a situation that's really uncomfortable for you. Like I've just found, and this is something you can't even choose, but it happens. The more you wake up, the more life really finds ways to put you in challenging situations that will just open you to physical experiences that are intense, surprising. And this isn't the like fun kind of shadow work. This is usually kind of when your mind is going, oh, I'd love to do this in a controlled setting. I'd love to feel this in retreat, but I'm so busy right now. I can't feel this right now. Be open to it. Just go, okay, right now, maybe I have to deal with the practicalities of the drama that's going on or whatever, but I can take this home and I can actually sit with this and go, man, I feel so out of control based on what's going on at work. This fear of helplessness is here. And right. So the second modality of shadow work that I'm talking about, where life does it to you, you can't choose it, you can't do it, and you can't direct it, but you can be open and willing to let those situations and eventualities really show you things you wouldn't be able to see without those conditions arising. That's my whole answer.
And I'll just really quickly add as well, because Angelo covered pretty perfectly the emotion that you're touching on. And I sense in your question, the question around feminine and masculine energy, because like Angelo points out, we always are happy to do a shadow work as long as it's on my terms, as long as it's kind of in my environment. So surrender is sometimes missed out because it's like, right, today I'm going to get up and do 1 hour of shadow work, which doesn't really make much sense because the shadow only reveals itself when you don't want it to. It's one of those things where you can do it on the cushion and definitely and do the inquiries to kind of trigger them up, but the real gold mine is out in the world. It's these things that come up, and again, when these transmute, you just Lisa commented, are you the guest today? Yes. There's this realization that there's so much relief from the cycle of transmutative shadow work that you start to realize every time you come out of it is so much more blissful, and everything we're looking for in these kind of masculine sometimes inquiries was found really embracing. And Angelo said very perfectly that it's really a surrender, because you live life, I would say you live life like a prayer in a way. You live life completely open. And it's the devotion again. Can you see how many questions sometimes, this isn't you, this is every question, I've asked it millions of times, which is always like, we want to feel better, but devotion is really no agenda. It's like, of course these stuff are going to come. We want maximal extraction, like putting ourselves sometimes in places which is going to really uproot this stuff. So it's perfect that you see where it's going to be, and we're just weaning ourselves off these agendas that sometimes come in. And I just want to touch on the feminine energy, because really it's the feminine energy which is the driving force for awakening in a way, because it's the deep surrender of the deep letting go, and the masculine energy kind of keeps this feminine energy in the right direction. And you can sense it's coming up inside you, because sometimes there can be a dryness to having quite a heady approach. and there can be quite an emptiness at times, which seems to have a ceiling to it. But when we allow this, if you think of the feminine energy as like a tsunami, and all that we can do is build a barricade against it, like a little beaver dam. So I can sense it's coming up inside of you where, you know, we've done enough 10-day retreats, and it's like we just want to let down this dam and let this love flood in, because it's really a warmth of love, of surrender, that washes out all of these inner resistances. And as a masculine, as a male, for example, there's a tendency to cling to the masculine, and it's almost culturally strange to surrender, to let go, to be vulnerable. And the word is vulnerability. So I can tell for a lot of people, what they're really wanting is just to allow their feminine. And this is nothing to do with gender, like to actually start like putting on feminine clothes. It's really like it's a feminine intention, and to allow this energy to come through. It's an openness, it's a vulnerability, it's really the heart of devotion as well, which at its core, if I had a tagline, it'd be, I'm going to sit with this forever, and I'm willing to face anything with no agenda. I'm not going to barter with life and try and make it feel better. You do start to fall in love with this openness. It's like the first time, I know it's a bit strange, but if you were naked, for example, and that was completely fine, that was normal to do, but you felt very closed, eventually it feels very freeing to not have any swords and shields and masks and this, and you start to fall in love with I mean, how many times have we met someone without a sword or a shield? We probably forget what childhood was like back then, but to meet people in this naked way, you're basically, without you knowing, you're going to become a teacher, a non-verbal teacher. Just the way that you present yourself in this open way is an invitation for others. So when you walk around with a shield, this masculine shield at times up, not you, just everyone, and myself included, the work becomes really the Rumi poet, which was dissolving all these barriers to love, which is really dissolving all the needs for a shield. And this vulnerability becomes an attractive field where you'll start to attract, like Angelo says, it seems like things are getting worse, but really the spirit is now giving you something on the plate that you're now able to handle. So it will never give you something more than you think you can chew. It seems like that sometimes, but the capacity to take on more and more will come, and eventually you'll be dealing with the deepest layers of ego, which just feel disgusting and horrible. But when they're transmuted, the darkest, blackest coal burns the brightest in this conversion of fear. So yeah, it's really just a feminine release as well. Just open up to it. I know there's gonna be a lot of listeners, which I know the way that I talk is sometimes very bit too heart-based for some, but I get that. But if that is triggering you, then I would actually say look into what's triggering around opening and surrender and vulnerability, because you're right on the money with where this is heading. It's all going to head towards the feminine. She always gets the last say in awakening. It's really a letting go completely.
Thank you. Thank you both. You Matt, you mentioned you're speaking about a lot of the feminine energy, and that way you two really balance each other in your answers. I just thought of this, that you've mentioned Jesus a few times tonight, and then you just mentioned children, and I always think about this quote, something like only the childlike or only the children will enter the gates of heaven. What's your take on that? Is it that vulnerability bit? That innocence?
It reminds me of when he said, when he came in the flesh, he found many men drunk, but few were thirsty. So many of us are completely in this delusional state, but few of us are thirsty to wake up. So it's really this vulnerability that you talk about, because those with thirst that need to be quenched by the love of truth really are going to be willing to surrender. But those that are just drunk in their illusions and don't have any intention to really sober up, because this is really a sobering. This is why, to me, Jesus came at a point where, look, let's forget what people took his message as. Jesus, to me, was the most pure teacher, but his message got so twisted in every single way. And he was, this is non-duality at its core. It's what at the heart of every religion, but it really started to wean off a lot of things that were still staying in place as a structural thing. And yeah, you've brought it up. It's really that childlike innocence, because childlike innocence is historyless. It has no thought. It has no judgment. It's truly a surrender of all thought mechanism, because it was so safe back then to not have thought, to not have distance, not have time. So yeah, you're right on the money. It's an innocence of any kind of sword or shield. That's really what a child is. It's very vulnerable because they haven't learned the habitual behaviors of causing some kind of shield to come up. Yeah.
Well, thanks
right.
again. I feel lighter, and
Beautiful.
I'll soak that in.
Thanks for your question.
Thank you, Angelo.
Okay. I have to leave in about 5 minutes. So we can do, you want to do speed round? We can do all 3 questions, but you got to be really concise. And we'll give you concise answers. How's that sound? If possible. Let's go to Jeff. I'm sorry, Kelly, excuse me.
Okay, you got me? You can hear me?
Yep, I got you.
Yeah, so this is, yeah, it's good that Matt's on this call. It's like similar theme, I think, as what other people are talking about. So it's the edge of where like life's throwing a bunch of shit at me. I feel better than ever, freer than ever. And it's definitely, I can feel the edge of the fear-based kind of personal self that it keeps wanting me to look at. I had a moment last night. It felt like for the first time where I was with someone and there was a bunch of stuff coming up in the field, collective stuff in the field, and it was like the first time that I could feel my body sort of dropping right into the actual real felt sense of it, and then starting to kind of just process it beyond me. But it took my systems kind of slowed down because I've had chronic health issues, and so it took like 5 to 10 hours just to let that process happen, and then it kind of, I was like out of it. But then I'm in a life situation where I live in this, I've been managing this home, so stuff's coming at me all the time, and it feels like life won't let up on this, like and I guess my question is, like, I can feel that my body mind system only has so much capacity to kind of really deeply allow it all in and process it. And I don't think it needs to always do that. Yeah.
It
I
has
don't
a
know. Do you got that? Yeah.
your body, your mind, as you said it, that like really hit for me. Your body mind has a limited capacity to knowingly manage it. It has an unlimited capacity to let it in fully. That's my answer. If you fully let it all in, that's how it feels to be empty of self.
It's like I feel like I can feel something in that that's kind of explosive, but I don't fully feel it. But
Yeah.
I guess I just gotta let that in somewhere, what you just said.
Yeah, let it sink. Okay, we're gonna move on.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's it, I guess. So we're
Okay.
good. Yeah.
I'm gonna try to knock these 2 out here in just a few minutes. All right, let's go to Jeff.
Okay. So I'll make it quick. This is a very old childhood pattern that is that just replays. So I have a 60-year history of repressing anger, and the worst of it is this one pattern that someone triggers me with something that makes me feel small, makes me feel not good enough. It brings on some feelings of shame. I react to that shame by getting angry at that person, but I have a belief that anger is a bad emotion, so I repress the anger. And then that repression of the anger then causes more self-shaming, and it pulls me into a depression. And so I've been struggling with depression for several decades. And so, most of the anger that I deal with, the lighter kind of anger, is, through this process has been easily processed. And, so many of the things that made me angry before just don't make me angry anymore. But this particular one, I just can't shake. And, it comes from, critical mother type stuff. And, I know exactly where it comes from. I can like see the anger kind of rising up. If I allow the anger to be, it balloons into this like incredible Hulk-like rage. And And then, you know, eventually it fades, but it leaves enough residue, and there's enough mind identification with it where it still sort of pulls me into that depression afterwards, you know, milder than the old days, but it's still there. And I just, this one pattern, I just can't seem to shake.
Can I give a perspective really quickly, just because I've worked with my dad actually a lot on this, because we're two different hooked up ways. So it's interesting that you believe the anger is the repressed emotion, because you freely express anger almost as a shield. I'm just going to talk about my dad for a moment. So he uses anger as a defense mechanism against his shame and his smallness. So really, he was repressing shame and smallness and grief. So for him to go into anger was like you say, there is a repression on the surface of anger. But what was more difficult for him was to go into shame and smallness and realize that if he worked through the shame and smallness, the anger didn't have to come up because there was nothing to protect. He was okay to feel grief, anger, shame, smallness, the vulnerability. So it may not be the case for you, but for him, the anger didn't have anything needing to protect. So that's just what it could obviously be a thing where there's a misconception around anger and there's a repression on the anger. So, you know, feel each emotion fully. But for me, the somatic inquiry into shame, what a lot of males have, they don't want to feel small, and to release these deeper layers, which are really sometimes guarded by the anger, kind of released a lot more, and the defenses didn't need to come up. So usually what we repress isn't so much what we're already expressing, but that's just, I'll be interested to see what Angelo says as well.
Just to clarify real quick though, so the reason I said repressed anger is that I would not actually express the anger. I would feel it rise up, but I didn't want to actually act on it. And so instead of being able to let it go, I would just stuff it down.
In that case, yeah, look at the both of them, because the shame is also a trigger, but then the anger response is also muted. But to be able to fully allow anger to come up and through is such a beautiful expression, and it just comes through because we're so culturally told to be polite, especially in England, especially in America. There's this, you go to somewhere like Italy and they're so expressive and everything, and they don't have the anger repression. So yeah, I would just both, but really look at the triggers of shame as well, because then the defense doesn't need to come up as well, but both of them. Yeah,
makes a ton of sense actually. Yeah,
very cool. Good. Thanks, Matt. Okay, we got one more. We'll see if we can do it quick. Gary. Last but not least.
Okay, I talked a little bit before, so I'll try to make this quick. Wonderful retreat. I've been doing shadow work for years. Started with Course in Miracles, that Vipassana really helped, and Rupert Spira, etc. So I've been doing a lot of that. Transmutation, perfect word. Been doing a lot of that. And I was really looking, and I finally, when I found your videos 5 weeks ago, I had my first real shift, the no self shift. And then on Saturday, I touched it. It was just wonderful. Now, so I'm kind of like, how to proceed. Now, part of it, I'm just going to keep doing the shadow work. Now, Matt kind of answered my question because he was talking about some other ways to do it, or you were talking about other ways to do it. And I felt, because it kind of feel my thoughts, and I went, no, I don't want to do that. So I probably need to do an improv class or something. Get out of my comfort zone is kind of what I heard. So
do it.
Just watch your thoughts about how to proceed.
Pardon? Oh, it's a blast. Yeah, you could look. So if you look online, depending on the city you live in, you may be able to find a very cheap drop-in class, like in your local area. They're cheap. A lot of times new people go, and then people who are experienced go as well. You can also find them online though. I think it's really fun, and it just puts you in a space that you just don't normally enter, where it's like a super creative space, but you have to be very present with other people. You can't be up in your head. You have to be focusing on what's actually being said so that you can like add to the whole thing. And it's really fun. They break it down into different exercises. I would recommend it. I would go for it. And congratulations on your experiences.
Well, thank you. And thank you. And thank Violet. That sound meditation just, it was huge. And actually taking all of the sense fields and overlaying them into one was huge, because then I experienced all of them at once, and they're right there, but there is a thought, and then here's a thought, and boom. So that was just absolutely amazing. So thank you so much again.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming. Sorry, I have to go just a few minutes early. Matt, thank you so much. It was awesome having you. I knew it was going to go very well, and it did. And you offered really cool perspectives. we don't see very often here. So thank you.
Beautiful, thank you. And yeah, I'd love to come visit at some point. I'm actually moving to America, so I'll come over to Colorado and finally meet in person. So thanks for everyone as well for coming on today. All the questions were so sincere and so direct on what's the problem, which is great. So thanks for
Where
having
can
me.
people find you?
So I'm in a process really of dissolving my personal YouTube just because of guidance, but I'm teaching on non-dual devotion, which is a shared collaborative thing, videos every day. It's called non-dual devotion. Maybe a link in the description, but yeah, move away from that. But yeah,
we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, everyone. Y'all take care. Thanks again for all your questions and your presence.